All right. Good morning, everyone. I hope your pulse is like this on the screen today and you didn't party too hard yesterday. I put this quote up on the screen. It's from a friend of mine. He, of course, also works in the observability space. And I like his thinking. If you can't define good, you can't measure good. So this is all, we are all here at SREday. So this is, of course, a key topic for us. And I like the idea of defining what does success mean for you. And without further ado, let's jump into the topic. The future of observability, trends, AI, and the vision for a smarter stack. I have brought to you today, this morning, a couple challenges that we face today when we think about monitoring applications and services. Some key trends, and also where I think the future will go in like the observability space. As you can hear from my accent, I'm not an English native speaker. I'm coming from the southern German part. This is actually a picture from my little village where I live in. I've been in software pretty much all my professional career. Started in the Microsoft developer ecosystem. Don't judge me for that. But I started a long time ago in Visual Basic 3 and 4 and all this legacy stuff. I've been with Relic since 2017, and if I'm not in front of a computer, I typically like all things outdoors. This time of year, still skiing is a favorite part of my leisure activity. So this is actually also my skiing area, and if you want to go, tomorrow is actually the last day, end of season for tomorrow. And I'm also the chief repair officer at home, and I'll get to why this is important in a couple seconds. To get the elephant out of the room, there will be a little bit of AI in this talk, as you can imagine. And I asked ChatGPT a couple of weeks back, based on what you know about me, draw a picture of what you think my current life looks like. And you may know that ChatGPT has a memory function. It remembers your prompts and everything you ask. And this is what it came back with. Here's an illustration of your developer life inspired by the Bavarian Alps. And this is what the picture looked like. And I thought this was amazing, right? Looks pretty similar like this at my home office. My little daughter, she asked me then, how does ChatGPT know that you have so many monitors at home? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe hallucinating. Anyways, interestingly, just this week, I saw this post on LinkedIn from the chief product officer of OpenAI. And what he mentioned is that they just enabled a new capabilities for photorealism image generation. And you may be wondering, I did the same prompt again just this week on Wednesday, and this is what it came back with. And I think this is amazing. The technology nowadays is really amazing. I was thrilled. But anyways, let's get into the topic. Some challenges. I have 3 challenges that I brought to you today that we typically face when we think about observability these days. The first one is, and this is, I recently attended an API Days conference, and this is from Mark from Gartner. The point that I want to make is that observability is across the chasm. It is not optional anymore. You have to think about observing your systems, getting all the things together, having context of what you're measuring and monitoring. And so it is not optional, right? You have to have some systems in place and observing what is happening, because otherwise you will be flying blind, right? You will be not knowing what's going on. And especially in these days when we have like large complex systems, lots of services talking and interacting with each other, it is really key to measure the reliability, performance, and be able to quickly troubleshoot. So observability, in my opinion, is like the equation of confidence and efficiency. So another key trend is, of course, AI evolution. Keeping up with this rapidly changing world, there's a lot of companies, organizations getting into AI, embedding AI into their applications, using LLMs to enhance their applications, adding some kind of capability. I will have a workshop at 10 this morning here where we focus on AI monitoring. And this is an interesting aspect as well. How can we observe what is happening with your AIs? Observing the cost, the quality, the performance of various models that you're using. So this is also key. And adopting microservices and APIs. We are at SREday, so this is not new for you. But we want to basically innovate faster and scale effortlessly. This is like the key that we are focusing on. The third aspect that I wanted to share is, and I recently heard this podcast from the Azure and DevOps podcast, and Jeff Sutherland, the co-creator of Scrum, he basically talked about the developer productivity. And I think this is really an interesting quote that he made. By the end of 2030, if we are not like 30% more efficient, we will be out of job, right? We have to adapt and we have to be more efficient and getting more things out, because otherwise there will be our competitors, they will be faster, they will be more efficient. So we have to adapt to that, and the developer productivity in various kinds of forms, being it the shift left approach, where you get more details to your developers right where they are, ideally in the IDE, or helping them get all the context and all the information is really a key aspect. And I think this was really an interesting quote that he made. And I think this is also a key challenge that we all are facing, right? We have to use these capabilities like the co-pilots and things like that to generate code to be more efficient. Some of the trends that we're seeing is, and the most important one in my opinion, is embracing open standards. What does it mean? Again, at the API Days conference, there was another talk focusing on building abstractions, not illusions. And he was also talking about standards and how standards enable you to be more efficient, to work together effectively. I to think about this in this analogy that I'm about to share today. And so does anyone can imagine what this represents? This could be like a spec of a Torx screw, right? And it defines the measures, the angles and everything. It has different specs. This is just a high-level abstraction. But if I, as a screw manufacturer, build my screws based on the standard that, of Torx and define this, I can build different screws, different size, different lengths, right? So if I, as a screw manufacturer, can rely on the standard, I can build screws and know that they are based on this standard. For me as a tool provider, it is a similar concept, right? If I build tools for the Torx spec here, I can rely on that whatever I'm building, I can know that the screws that the manufacturers build will fit to the tools that I build as a tool builder. And then this makes me happy as the chief repair officer at home, because I can rely on all the tools that I have at home and all the screws, and I know they will fit, right? I can work with them, and I don't have to think about, is the screw the perfect size? Does it fit? Is there any challenges? So this is really a key aspect. And I think in software, we have a similar problem. Who has heard about OpenTelemetry before? Okay, pretty much everyone. Who is using OpenTelemetry in production? Okay, nice. So really, this is a key trend, in my opinion, and it really opens up the capabilities when we all rely on the same standard, on the same specs for software, for telemetry specifically. Then we can also all agree on the same standards. And OpenTelemetry was really the merger from OpenTracing, which was focusing on tracing, OpenCensus just on the metrics. And OpenTelemetry tries to combine all the things, all the telemetry signals into a single standard. It has specs for all the different signals. So it is vendor neutral. This is, of course, also a key aspect, because if I, as a customer, want to build towards this standard, I can then rely on all the protocol and the specs, and then I can export the data to some backend of my choice. Maybe I will send the traces to some system, to some open source system, the metrics somewhere else, the logs again somewhere else. I have full control over what is happening. So it is really a nice approach to have a vendor neutral standard. It has a lot of benefits. I'll not go into the detail of this screen. It's a really busy screen, but it has for many different teams, for SREs, for product managers, for executives, it had a lot of benefits. And ideally, I have to instrument only once and then can use all of the code in a transparent way and rely on the standard, similar to the Torx analogy that I used before. It also comes with this concept of this OpenTelemetry collector that you can use to ingest data, so it has a receiving aspect. Processing is also key, especially we are here in Europe, where we have a lot of focus on data privacy and things like that. So I can process the data, I can obfuscate, I can encrypt the data based on the information. If some of my developers send in some debug logs, I can drop them directly in the collector. So I have a lot of processing power here. And then I can export the data to some observability backend like Relic or any other vendor, or I can use some open source tooling as well. The third aspect is, of course, key trends in observability. The reason why we have these observability platforms these days is we want to ideally have all the telemetry in a single platform. To understand when we have an issue, we have all the context in place. We know from the traces, metrics, and logs from various systems. But this is also This is a benefit, a good thing, but it's also a challenge because it can be overwhelming to looking at these modern observability platforms. It can be overwhelming to look at all the things that we capture and trying to understand what is going on. Ideally, AI-driven insights help me to understand what is happening, doing some predictive analysis, anomaly detection, or some patterns that I maybe have on my logs that recognize some things that are going on. But also from a developer perspective, I also need to have ideally some agentic integrations. Ideally, if I'm using Copilot, maybe I have an integration, an agentic integration that helps me understand from my observability platform. I can interact in natural language with that tool and ask Copilot, hey, in the recent deployment, what was going on? Do I have any issues? Should I focus on some aspects and things like that? So I want to quickly detect and resolve operational issues, ideally right where I, as a software developer or SRE, live in the platforms that I'm using on a day-to-day basis. And then if you look at the challenges that we're facing and the trends that we're seeing, how could modern observability, the future of observability, look like? And in my opinion, I think we need to adapt to complexity with precision. And what do I mean by that? And I have this other analogy that I want to use in this talk. So what does precision mean? Precision, in my opinion, refers to high cardinality. And what does high cardinality mean? So you may be thinking, what is this picture showing? It is a parking lot with a lot of cars on it. And then if we measure a couple metrics here, so a metric could be how many cars are parked on this parking lot at a point in time. In the last hour, maybe I've seen 400 cars, whatever. The average fuel level across all the cars is X. What is the battery level? Do I have electric cars or fuel-based cars? And then so on and so forth. But ideally, with high cardinality, what I mean by that is we want to have additional context. And context in this case could be, I want to have, for each of the cars that are parked, I want to have some additional attributes like the location, the exact location, the geolocation. I want to have maybe the VIN, the vehicle identification number. Maybe I will have the driver ID or some user ID that I can also rely on that. So what does it mean, having additional context here? Is in the case of an issue, imagine we are monitoring the cars and we have some interactions and the users are using their mobile phone to unlock their cars and try to find the location. If I have a couple issues, if I'm monitoring this parking lot and observing what is happening, maybe I want to understand if I have 100 exceptions, 100 issues that are occurring when I'm observing this, how do I know that all of these exceptions come from a single car only or from all the cars that are parked there or from the majority of the cars? So giving me that additional context is really key to understand what is happening, what is going on, and how can I find the root cause of the issues quickly. And I'm a big fan of adding these custom information to your traces, to metrics and logs, because at the end of the day, it helps you to understand more quickly what is happening and what is going on. And then, of course, also AI ops. So this is an example. We are experimenting with this a little bit. Ideally, imagine you have an issue that is occurring, and from all the telemetry that you're capturing, what is going on, what is the issue, but what is really impacted by this? And by using AI in the future, we may be able to get like a report like this automatically generated for me that says, hey, the service, the checkout service in this case is experiencing some issues, and what is really impacted? How many users are impacted? Is it a critical issue? Is it a not so critical issue? So all of this could be automatically generated for me, and using AI ops helps me identifying this. And then again, also the additional context. What happened previously? Putting this issue that we are facing in context to what happened previously. Maybe someone deployed a new release, and this is causing the issue. So having this additional context and what happened outside of my little box is so important, and getting all the context correlated with all the other information is really key. And then also recommendations. We understood what was the impact, what has happened previously, so all the additional context around it, but how can we avoid this in the future? So maybe we need to define, hey, you maybe want to define some fallback mechanisms in the future, or rolling back, or some other things. So helping me and getting an understanding of, okay, we faced an issue, but now how can we avoid this in the future, and helping you understand this and getting some best practices in place is really key for this. And then Lastly, agentic DevOps. What do I mean by that? Agentic DevOps. I think I mentioned it at the beginning. So ideally, when we think about all the different things that we are capturing, like all the telemetry, all the information that we're capturing, how can we make our life easier and more useful? I want to have some IDE integrations that help me. I'm developing software in my IDE and I use Copilot to empower this. We have different ways of integrating using agentic agents to help you orchestrate, right? Maybe you have an issue when you face some exceptions and then you want to understand, hey, what is going on? And having agentic agents running around and focusing on various different topics. Maybe I have a deployment agent that helps me understand what is going on. Having another agent that interact with each other. And basically, I don't need to be a human in this game. I can have these agentic agents act for me. And so there's a lot of AI-driven things that we can do, fast path to remediation and things like that. So this is really a key topic when we think about how can we make these agents more effective in talking to each other. So in conclusion, I think we looked at a couple challenges that we face. Observability really isn't optional anymore. We have to use observability in our environments. And also, especially if we integrate AIs and LLMs into our applications, there's also this, in Europe, there's the EU AI Act in place that actually forces you to use monitoring to observe your applications. All of the applications will be put into different categories, and based on the criticality and the category of your software, you have to use some form of observability to understand your AI-enabled applications. AI evolution, I think we're all seeing this. There's more and more AI coming into the game, like in our applications, but also in our day-to-day life. And really, the developer productivity is really what we want to focus on by 2030. Being more effective in our day-to-day use is really key for that. And we looked at a couple of trends, embracing open standards like open telemetry, AI-driven insights, agentic integrations. And then for the future, I think if we adapt to complexity with precision, having context in place helps us understand how we are working. AI ops and agentic DevOps is, in my opinion, what we will have in the future when we help us understand what is going on in our systems and empowering developers and SREs in their day-to-day life. So with that, thank you very much for your attendance. I hope it was useful, and I'll open it up for questions you may have.